All right, ready to dive into economic growth. It's not just a CFA Level 2 topic, it's like understanding how the world ticks.
Yeah, for sure. It really impacts everything. Investments, government decisions, you name it.
Exactly. But sometimes cracking open that CFA curriculum feels like I'm staring at hieroglyphics, you know? So today, we'll break it down, make it real, maybe even have some fun with it.
You know what trips people up? It's memorizing formulas without getting the big idea. So let's build that intuition today, and those formulas won't be so scary.
Love that. And speaking of big ideas, first up is developed versus developing economies. We hear about booming Asian or African economies, but what sets their growth apart from, say, the US or Europe's?
Potential, potential. Imagine two runners. One's almost at the finish line, the other's just starting. Who's got more room to improve dramatically?
Well, the one just starting out, obviously.
Exactly. It's like that with economies. Developing ones, even with lower GDP now, they can grow way faster. More room to catch up, more untapped resources, more workforce to bring in.
So it's not just where a country is, but where it's headed. That's kind of encouraging, actually.
It is. But remember, potential's not automatic growth. Lots of factors unlock it or hold it back.
Like ingredients in a recipe. Right.
Yeah.
Got to have the right mix to make something good. So what are those essential economic growth ingredients? Let's start with savings and investment, because a country needs capital to grow, yeah.
Absolutely. Savings, they're the fuel for investment. Think about it. You want to build a factory, develop tech, you need money. That money comes from folks saving some of what they earn.
So higher savings rate equals more investment power equals more potential growth.
Precisely. But it's not just how much you save, it's how it gets used, put into good investments. That's where financial markets and those middleman institutions come in.
Like banks, stock markets, right. They connect the savers with the borrowers, kind of build bridges between them.
Exactly. Efficient systems are key because then capital goes to the best, most productive uses. Think about it. You've got a great business idea, but can't get a loan. That potential's wasted.
It's like a Ferrari stuck in first gear. All that power, but no transmission to unleash it. A strong financial system, that's your well-oiled transmission.
Perfect analogy. And why for the CFA Level 2, folks? This stuff is huge.
Okay, we've got savings, investment, this good financial machine running. What else goes on our recipe list?
Might sound basic, but political stability, rule of law, property rights, these are essential. Like building a house on solid ground versus quicksand, right? Businesses won't invest if they're worried about corruption, changing rules all the time, there's stuff getting taken.
Makes sense. Hard to build anything when you're worried about the ground collapsing.
Right. Investors got to feel confident. The rules stay stable, contracts are honored, investments are safe. That stability lets businesses thrive, lets them actually plan for the long term.
So it's not just the money part. It's creating that environment where businesses feel secure.
Exactly. And this is huge especially for developing economies trying to attract foreign investors.
Because no one wants to put their money in a place where the rules keep changing or might get taken away. So good laws, stable politics, that's the bedrock for everything else.
Couldn't agree more. That foundation matters.
Okay, foundation's there, but we need workers, right? Where do education and healthcare fit into all this?
Think of it this way. Healthy, educated people, they work better. Healthy, they're more productive. Educated, they got the skills for a modern economy.
So those investments are like investing in human capital, just as important as the physical stuff, like factories.
Absolutely. And here's where things might look different for developed versus developing nations. The focus shifts. Developed, maybe it's higher ed, specialized training. Developing, maybe it's basic literacy, primary school, to build a wider base.
So tailoring the investment to where the economy's at makes sense.
Yep. But no matter the level, investing in people, it's crucial.
Okay, we've got savings, investment, those institutions, the human side of things. What about the government? I know we said stability matters, but what about taxes, regulations, all that?
Governments, they're like the referees setting the rules of the economic game, and those rules can help or hurt growth, big time.
So too much red tape, bureaucracy, that makes it hard to do business, discourages investment.
Exactly. Countries serious about growth, they try to make things business-friendly.
So like easy permits, clear tax codes, things that encourage competition, removing roadblocks, making a level playing field for businesses to do their thing.
Precisely. But it's not just cutting regulations. Governments also got to invest in the public stuff. Infrastructure, education, healthcare, all that we talked about.
Right. It's that balance between helping business, but also making sure everyone benefits from growth.
Exactly. And for our CFA Level 2 folks, this is key. Understanding how government actions affect growth, That's huge for making good investment choices.
Okay, so we've covered a lot. Savings, investment, markets, institutions, people, the government's role. Anything else on our economic growth recipe list?
One more key ingredient to unlock a country's potential: free trade and letting capital flow freely.
So opening up to the global market. But why is that so important for growth, especially for developing countries?
Imagine you're a small business, great product, but your market's tiny. Open up to trade, boom, you've got billions of potential customers worldwide. Game changer.
Right, like going from the local farmer's market to like global supermarket shelves. Huge difference.
Exactly. And it's not just selling more. Free trade means you can import stuff that's hard to make yourself. Consumers get more choices, lower prices, access to new tech.
So everybody wins, in theory.
In theory, yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, it's never that simple.
Right, because there's always winners and losers when things change.
Hmm.
Some local industries will face tougher competition from foreign companies. Jobs could be lost.
Exactly. And that's why how you manage that transition to being more open matters a lot. Government's got to help workers who get displaced invest in training so they can adapt to new opportunities.
So recognizing the downsides, but also seeing the potential, especially for developing countries.
Precisely. And this brings us to another CFA Level 2 concept: foreign direct investment, FDI, and foreign portfolio investment, FPI. Two big ways money moves across borders, helping developing economies grow.
Okay, so FDI is like foreign companies building factories or buying businesses directly in another country. FPI is more about buying stocks or bonds in that other country.
You got it. Both can be powerful for growth. They bring in money, create jobs, transfer knowledge, and local companies learn from global best practices.
So opening up to trade and investment, it can be like a boost of energy for an economy, especially one still developing.
That's a great way to put it. But it takes more than just opening the doors, right?
Right, back to all those things we talked about. Stability, good legal systems, skilled workers, business-friendly rules, the whole package.
Exactly. That's what makes a place attractive for investment, brings in the capital, fuels that growth.
All right, so much covered in this first part of our deep dive. Key ingredients, government's role, trade, and investment. A lot to think about. But I have a feeling things are about to get even more interesting as we dig into how economists actually measure and analyze growth.
You're right, we're about to get a bit more technical. Don't worry, we'll make it understandable, even if you've never taken an econ class. Okay, so we've talked about the big things that drive economic growth, but how do we actually measure it, analyze it? One of the tools economists use is called a production function.
Production function, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Sounds kind of heavy. Do I need to dig out my old calculus notes for this?
Nah, no calculus marathons today. Think of it like a recipe. Simple. It tells us how much we can produce, output, with what we put in. Things like labor, capital, that's the input side.
So more workers, more machines means we can make more stuff. Makes sense on the surface.
Exactly. And one of the most common ones economists use is the Cobb-Douglas production function. Now, before you tune out, let me tell you why this matters, especially for that CFA Level 2 you're prepping for.
All right, sell me on it. Why Cobb-Douglas?
It helps us understand how those inputs and outputs relate in an economy. And it's actually pretty insightful for investors. Say you're looking at a company in a booming economy. This function can help you estimate how much their production might go up as the economy adds more workers, more capital.
So it's like a crystal ball for growth potential.
You could say that, and it helps us grasp this idea of constant returns to scale, which Cobb-Douglas assumes. Basically, double all the inputs, you double the output.
Okay, so double the workforce, double the machines, double the product coming out. Sounds simple enough.
Sounds like it, but there's a twist. This is where it gets interesting for investors. In the real world, we see this thing called diminishing marginal productivity.
Hold on, diminishing what now? Break that down. What does that even mean?
Picture a coffee shop. You're the owner. You hire one barista. They crank out, let's say, 50 cups an hour. Great. Hire another. Now you're at 90 cups per hour. Awesome. But then you hire a third, fourth, fifth. Your total keeps going up, but each new person adds less and less. Maybe with 5, you're only at 130 cups an hour. More workers, but each one's impact is shrinking.
Yeah, too many cooks in the kitchen kind of thing. You hit a point where more doesn't give you as much extra.
You got it. That's diminishing returns. And it's important for investors because it shows you can't just throw money at a problem, more capital, and expect endless growth.
So just building more factories, hiring more people, that won't automatically lead to an economy growing forever.
Nope. Eventually hit that wall of diminishing returns. And that brings us to another key concept for CFA Level 2, growth accounting.
Growth accounting. Sounds like we're about to do some economic sleuthing.
You bet. We got to break down growth into its parts, figure out how much comes from more labor, how much from more capital, and how much from this thing called total factor productivity, TFP.
Total factor productivity, TFP. All right, that sounds like a secret ingredient. What's that all about?
Think of TFP as what makes an economy run better. It's everything not directly explained by labor and capital. Tech innovation, better education and skills, smarter management, even a stable political scene, all that contributes.
So it's how effectively an economy is using what it's got.
Precisely. And here's why investors care. TFP, it's the engine of long-term sustainable growth.
So while more labor and capital give you a boost in the short run, it's those efficiency gains, the new ideas that keep things going for the long haul.
You got it. And that's one reason why Cobb-Douglas, while useful, it's got its limits.
Okay, back to those limitations then. Hit me with the finer points.
Remember, models, they're just simplified versions of reality. Cobb-Douglas captures some key stuff, but not everything.
So what's missing from the picture?
For one, it assumes constant returns to scale, which we just talked about. That's not always true. Plus, there's technological change. The basic model doesn't handle that very well.
Right, because a new invention, that can completely change the game, let you produce way more with what you already have.
Exactly. Tech progress can shift that whole production function upward, meaning more productivity, more output overall.
It's not just baking a bigger cake with the same stuff. It's finding whole new recipes to make something even better.
Perfect analogy. And this brings us to a key difference for CFA Level 2. Capital deepening versus technological progress.
Okay, lay it on me. Capital deepening versus tech progress. What's the distinction?
Capital deepening, it's about piling on more capital, more factories, machines, infrastructure, boosts output for a bit, but we know it hits those diminishing returns.
Right, because at some point just adding more doesn't give you as much back.
Exactly. Technological progress, though, that's about doing things better, new inventions, better processes, squeezing more out of your resources.
So it's not just having more, it's having better stuff and better ways of using it.
You nailed it. That's where the real magic of growth is. Tech progress lets us break free from those diminishing returns, and living standards can keep rising long term.
Okay, I'm seeing why this matters. Capital deepening, it's a sprint. Tech progress, that's the marathon winner.
That's the one. And for those CFA Level 2 studies, understanding what drives tech progress, that's huge. It's looking beyond just labor and capital to things like R&D, education, the whole environment that helps innovation happen.
All right, we've done production functions, those diminishing returns, growth accounting, capital versus tech. My brain's getting a workout here.
It is a lot, but we're not done yet. Got a few more key ingredients to consider. Natural resources, labor, infrastructure, those all play a part too.
Okay, I'm ready for the next layer of this economic cake we're baking up. Okay, so we've looked at how economists measure this whole growth thing, but what about natural resources? Countries loaded with oil, minerals, they've got to have an edge, right?
You'd think so, but it's not that simple. Natural resources and growth, it's a tricky relationship. More resources doesn't always equal more wealth.
Okay, so it's not as straightforward as it seems. What am I missing here?
For one thing, having a ton of natural resources, that doesn't make you successful automatically. Lots of countries with oil, minerals, timber coming out their ears, they've struggled to grow consistently.
So it's not just having it, it's what you do with it, how it fits into the whole economic picture.
Bingo. And one big challenge is dodging this thing called the resource curse. Countries that rely too much on exporting just their raw materials, their economies can get super volatile. Other industries don't grow as much. Even corruption can get worse.
Makes sense. If your whole country depends on, like, the price of oil, any little wobble in that price, and everything goes haywire.
You got it. Plus, it can discourage investing in other stuff, so you're not diversified. One problem hits, and it's a bigger deal.
Like putting all your eggs in one basket. Not exactly a recipe for stability and growth.
Exactly. For those CFA Level 2 studies, that risk is important. Gotta analyze how reliance on natural resources might affect a country's future.
All right, so resources are tricky. What about labor? We talk about human capital, but what else about labor affects growth?
Well, the size of your workforce, who's in it, that matters. Growing population can mean more workers, but only if they've got the skills and education for a modern economy, right?
Goes back to that human capital idea, investing in people.
Exactly. But it's not just how many workers, it's how many are actually working. That participation rate, what % of folks who could work are actually employed or looking for jobs?
More people working, more contributing, that should boost the whole output, right?
Makes sense. And then you've got demographics, things like populations getting older, birth rates dropping. That changes the workforce, too.
Feels like we're solving a puzzle, and all the pieces are moving around on us.
Haha, yeah, kinda. And one more piece of that puzzle is infrastructure.
Okay, infrastructure. We touched on that before, but why is it so important for growth?
Think of it as the backbone, the skeleton of an economy.
Yeah.
Roads, bridges, airports, the power grid, communications, all that connects businesses, workers, consumers.
Without it, it's like running a marathon with a sprained ankle.
Yeah.
You're not going to get far.
Exactly. Investing in infrastructure that can boost productivity, make transport cheaper, helps trade, attracts investment. It's the groundwork for a more efficient, competitive economy.
So it's not just pretty new airports, it's making sure everything flows smoothly. People, goods, services.
Precisely. And here's where governments are crucial. Infrastructure needs big investments, long-term planning.
Right, because building a highway or high-speed rail, that's not a quick return on investment. It takes vision, commitment to the long haul.
Exactly. And for our CFA Level 2 folks, this is big. The role of infrastructure, especially in developing economies with big needs there, that's got to be part of your analysis.
All right, so we've got our ingredients, savings, investment, those markets, human capital, government, trade, resources, labor, infrastructure. Feels like we've baked a pretty complex economic cake here.
We have. But now, the fun part, tasting it. Time to dig into the theories, how all this stuff interacts to create growth over the long term.
All right, bring on those economic theories. Let's see what flavor we've got here.
Let's start way back. One of the first theories, the classical one. You might have heard of Thomas Malthus, kind of a gloomy guy.
Malthus, yeah. Wasn't he the one who said we're all going to run out of food and end up miserable?
That's him. His idea was population grows super fast, food production not so much. So eventually you would have too many people, not enough to eat, leading to famine, disease, everyone's worse off.
Back to the Stone Age for all of us, huh? Not the most optimistic outlook.
Well, thankfully things haven't quite gone that way. He raised some good points, but he missed one big thing. Innovation.
Right, because humans, we're pretty good at figuring out how to grow more food, use stuff smarter.
Exactly. So along comes the neoclassical growth theory, Robert Solow in the 1950s. This one gets that capital has diminishing returns, but it says tech progress. That's the long-term growth driver.
So adding more capital alone eventually stalls, but new ideas, they can break us out of that and keep things improving.
Exactly. This model also brings in steady-state growth. An economy finds a balance between investment, depreciation, how fast the population's growing, leads to a stable growth rate over time.
Steady state growth, so kind of like reaching economic cruising altitude.
In a way, yeah. But even then, new tech can push that cruising altitude higher, meaning more output, more income in the long run.
So it's not static, it's like we're constantly upgrading our economic plane as we go.
Love that analogy. And that leads us to a newer theory, endogenous growth theory.
Endogenous, okay, that one sounds a bit more complex. What's the difference?
It challenges that old idea that tech progress just happens, comes from outside the system. Endogenous says no, it's driven by stuff within the economy, investment in R&D, education, all those human capital things.
So we're not just waiting for the next light bulb moment to strike. We can actually cultivate those breakthroughs by making smart choices.
You got it. Big implications for governments, right? They can actively encourage innovation, create an environment where people want to invest in knowledge and skills.
Not just passengers on the economic train. We can be the conductors, influencing where it goes.
Perfect analogy. And for those CFA Level 2 studies, grasping these different growth theories, that's key to analyzing countries, making investment choices.
So much covered already. We've got the drivers, how we measure it, these theories. But one big question remains. Will developing economies catch up to the developed ones? Economists have been arguing about that forever, haven't they?
They have. And no easy answer. Evidence for both sides. We've seen some amazing catch-up stories. South Korea, Singapore went from developing to developed super fast.
Soon, right past the slow lane.
Exactly. But then others, that convergence stalls out, maybe even goes in reverse. Some seem stuck in a rut, can't escape poverty, underdevelopment.
Like there's different lanes on this economic highway, some much faster than others.
Great way to put it. So we've got these ideas of absolute convergence versus conditional convergence. Absolute says everyone eventually reaches the same income level no matter where they started. Conditional says, nah, depends on your savings rate, population growth, how good your institutions are, all that.
So similar conditions,
Yeah.
more likely to converge, But no guarantee everyone ends up at the same destination.
Precisely. Then there's club convergence, kind of like convergence within groups of similar countries, but not necessarily global convergence.
So some countries might be stuck in the slow growth club, others are hanging out in the fast lane.
Exactly. Understanding these different flavors of convergence, that's crucial for our CFA Level 2 folks trying to figure out which economies have the best long-term potential.
Man, we have covered so much ground in this deep dive. The drivers of growth, how it's measured, the theories behind it, this whole convergence idea. My head's spinning, but in a good way.
It's been a wild ride. The big takeaway, though, economic growth, it's not a simple thing. There's no one-size-fits-all formula. It's a mix of good policies, smart investments, a skilled workforce, and yeah, sometimes a bit of luck doesn't hurt.
And for investors, understanding all this, that's how you make good decisions. Where to put your money, which companies to back, how to navigate this crazy global economy.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Well, that about covers it for economic growth. This is really just the start, though. Keep exploring, keep asking questions, keep learning. The more you know about how this stuff works, the better off you'll be in the finance world.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. See you next time for another adventure into the world of finance.